Hello and welcome to this Chicago Violin Competition interview series. My name is Rob Simonds. I'm the former principal second violinist of the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, and I've been a judge on the CVC Young Artist Division for 2 years. And today I'm joined by Brandon Dew, the winner of the 2022 Senior Division. Welcome, Brandon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Brandon, you've had a lot of competition success over the years, and now you're a student at Yale University. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But you're originally from the Baltimore area. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got started on the instrument?
So when I was like 3, I heard one of my friends, like a family friend, he's 4 years older than me. I heard him play, and I thought it was pretty cool. So I asked my parents for a violin, and when I was 4, they gave me one for my 4th birthday. We didn't know anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't know they had the rosin the bow. And so what happened was we couldn't get the violin to make any sound. So we went to the friend who was playing violin. We went to his teacher, and we were like, "Is there something wrong with this instrument? You know, can we have a lesson?" And we went, and for the first lesson, apparently, I don't remember this, but apparently all I did was run around and open cabinets and look at like figurines of stuff. So that was my first lesson, technically. And then my parents went home and they were like, okay, you need to focus. We're trying to get you to learn an instrument, at least for a little bit. It was just for fun. But the next week I did the same thing. And my teacher, she was like, maybe he's a bit too young, maybe this is not for him. So then my parents got a little bit upset with me. And then they were like, okay, you really need to focus. Like you can no running around, no nothing. So the next week, the third week, finally, I stood there and I like stared straight at my teacher for like 30-minute class. I just I did not move. I just stared at her. And yeah, after that I just stuck with her. She was my teacher for all of high school. Her and her husband, great support. I mean, I owe so much to those two. They've done so much for me, and not just for violin, but they've also been just like an emotional support, just someone who's always been there for me.
That's really an interesting story. A lot of us start when we're really young, and I had the benefit of having a family member who is a violinist, a trained violinist. So, to get you over those first few hurdles is really important. I'm curious, you could tell us more about, though, as you matured a little bit, maybe got past the age of 4 or 5 or so, as you started to get older, who were some of the bigger influences you had as a fiddle player? Like, who were the people you started looking up to?
At first, it was like people in my studio, and then as I got older, I obviously I listened to recordings. My favorite violinist has always been Oistrakh, but
Hmm.
for specific music, it has changed. When I first started playing Bach, I listened to Sharing a lot. I thought it was, I still do. I think it's so
Hmm.
like so serious, so powerful. I mean, but it's nowadays I try to mix it up as well. I listen to some more stuff with like more Bach, Bachy playing, more like Baroque style.
Hmm.
Um, but as for romantic music, I I listen to mostly Oistrakh. Um, I like old school
I could
Russian
tell.
playing.
I could tell. Well, those are great. Those are great recordings, and those are great influences to have. I remember going to hear some really formative concerts when I was a kid. Like I heard Josh Bell play at the conservatory when I was, and it really changed my opinion about like how this thing can work. And other concerts, the Boston Symphony, and so forth. Do you have any like formative memories of concerts you saw?
Yeah, I remember I went to one Vengerov played a recital,
Mhm.
and this was a while ago. I think I was in like middle school. Um, this he played the Last Rose of Summer. And this was the I didn't know the piece, and I remember very specifically the section with the arpeggios where he goes up and he's doing the left hand picks with the arpeggios. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And he also played 5 encores that recital. So that was a that was a very very Vangeroff, but it was very definitely a very like inspirational concert I went to.
Yeah, I
for
remember
sure.
seeing him play when I was in college in Cincinnati. I drove up to Cleveland to hear him play Prokofiev Concerto, and he did a bunch of encores. And one of the encores was the Six Seas I Sonata, and it almost was like it was fast forward, like it was so fast. It was like the most incredible, almost like superhuman, physical. It was like watching an Olympian or like watching Cirque du Soleil or something. Like, how does a human being even do that? So, can you tell me a little bit about your experience in youth orchestra?
So I started in our local youth orchestra
Hmm.
in, I think I was in third grade, and I just stayed with them. I started in they had like the the orchestra for young, like elementary schoolers and then middle schoolers and high schoolers. So I just climbed up the ranks and I think orchestra has really been like really not only just really helpful for music because you have it's basically like playing big chamber music, but
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
also think that it's just a great environment to be in, especially in my youth orchestras. Everybody is like super supportive of each other, and there's not like a lot of competition where like people are like competing for like a higher seat or like
Hmm. Hmm.
this to sit here, blah blah blah. I think it was very well designed.
Yeah, when I was obviously younger than you, I was in the Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra, and I don't know if I would have stuck with the violin if I hadn't had an experience like that. Really, like I think that thing you talk about, the support of your peers and the camaraderie of orchestra playing, I think is something that's really vital as in your education and as you mature as a violinist. Even, I mean, it's an individual pursuit, but really we're doing this to make music with other folks. You're at Yale University now. You're a freshman. Can you tell us a little bit about how your musical life is evolving there, playing in orchestra? How your practicing is going? What's your musical life like there?
Mhm. It's definitely really different because in high school, I definitely had like I had less time in the sense of I had to go to school,
Hmm.
but I also have more work here. So it's definitely
Hmm.
way different in that sense. Also, orchestra here, everybody is it's the same like an environment, but like scaled up. Everybody is super good.
Hmm.
But everybody is still super nice and super supportive. And I think I really like that in orchestra. As for solo playing, it's definitely a bit of a struggle to balance because
Hmm.
especially semester or course load is getting heavy. But yeah, I try to just keep a schedule for myself. I try to use practice in between like studying as like to take a break, kind of just to switch off. So I'm not always doing academics for a long period of time and then music for a long period of time. I try to go
Hmm.
between like academics and then I'll play violin for like an hour and a half.
I was going to say, since you have these time constraints and these competing pressures, how has that influenced your practicing? Like, what are you prioritizing in that hour that you've been playing, and how has that changed from when you had more free time?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing that I had to change was the way I practice scales because I used to play at least in high school when I had like a lot more time to practice. I would play um, scales on one strings, a bunch of
Hmm.
arpeggios, a bunch of double stops. But now it's I don't have as much time, so I had to
Hmm.
cut some things out, which is unfortunate. But I mean, yeah, I just don't have that time. But now I really focus a lot on technical aspects of practicing, like the getting the notes, like intonation, all of that. And then for things like phrasing, for like things like playing with a piano or playing with the orchestra, whatever the score, or if like how I want to like structure this or this, I think of that in my like I'll usually think about it if I'm like doing nothing, I'll be walking around, not
Hmm.
necessarily in high school. I would like sit down in the middle of practice. I'll be like, I want to do this and this and this, or maybe I'll like try to fiddle around with stuff. But now I try to do that in my head so I don't have to spend time doing that in the practice room when I really need to be like actually playing. So I think that's
Yeah.
one big difference.
When I was a kid, I remember playing a youth concert of some kind and Lynn Harrell, the cellist, was conducting, and he said something about the fact that like every moment in the rehearsal of an orchestra is a lifetime. Like you have the opportunity to practice. There's no point at which you should be tuning out. You should always be thinking about like how to make something better. That's always stuck with me. 20 plus years in my career, I thought about that all the time. Anytime my mind was wandering while the winds were being rehearsed, I was like, no, I can be thinking about how we can improve this. So when I was a student, Miss Lay used to say something like, every violinist should practice scales, Bach and Paganini, and whatever rep they're working on throughout the day. And for me, that I had to cut away some of that. When you're an orchestra player, you have so much new music to learn that like it's not possible really to practice all that stuff. So for me, my daily routine was scales and Bach. That was non-negotiable. Do you have parts of
Mhm.
your like specifically like parts of your warm-up routine or something that is non-negotiable? Do you play something every day?
For warm up, I try not to use scales as warm up because I feel like
Mm,
scales are like such like a important part of playing. I feel like if I'm using it as warm up, then I'm inherently saying scales are less important than something else, which I don't think that's true. So I think I start off to warm up, I'll play like just some I used to play like Dunas. He has
hmm
some like the Daily Dozen. I do just pick some exercises from there. Now I will just I'll do like some scales, but in like weird ways. So I'll do like scales like a C major scale, well with only with 3 and 4 fingers, 3 and 4. So uh I'll do that, or and then I'll play like some parts of some piece I played before, just to get my fingers warm, and then starts like the scales. Of the scales. So I still do single string scales,
hmm
and then 3 octave, 4 octave, and then I'll do thirds and sixths one day, and then octaves, fingered octaves and tenths on alternate days.
And
Yeah,
I
I
say,
mean,
Brandon, that's a really profound statement, though, that the scales are not a warm up because it inherently puts that down a leg. I think if I take away nothing else from this conversation, I'm going to take away that sentiment. So speaking about, so we kind of got these foundational parts of your playing, and for the competition, you submitted two extraordinary performances of Tchaikovsky Concerto and Zagan. Do you feel most at home in that romantic repertoire?
definitely. I think pieces which are very like energetic, powerful, strong
Mm-hmm.
pieces. That's definitely my strong suit. Um, um, I've been trying to work on like I think one of the things in my Zagan that I was trying to work on, I am trying to work on, is I think that a lot of it is a bit some too strong almost. It's always strong, and I want to start incorporating, some more of the softer sides, which yeah, but in general, I really do prefer things that are more like melodic, more romantic.
When you choose your repertoire for a competition, do you use that as an opportunity to kind of stretch yourself and play stuff, or do you go by the stuff that you feel is the best presentation of what you can do, like stuff that you have a long relationship with?
Yeah, so for competitions in general, I try to pick pieces that like I have not played, but will
Mm.
also they'll show off like what I'm good at. So
hmm
I will, for example, I will never play Beethoven Concerto for a competition. There's
It's
no
a
way.
smart move.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
funny, Brandon. What I want to hear more about that, but I will say, like, this is a really interesting point. Like, on orchestra audition committees, sometimes when somebody comes in and plays the Beethoven Concerto, it's hard to take them very seriously because, and this is behind the screen, right? You can't see who this person is, but like this is such bad judgment. Like it's bad judgment to play this piece because it's so hard to play convincingly without the full orchestra behind you or just with piano accompaniment. So yes, I think like I want to hear more about this idea of finding some equilibrium between stretching yourself with new things and picking the repertoire you're best at.
yeah, definitely. So I try to like find, for example, if I were to play a new competition, I might now start learning the Dvorak concerto I've never learned before, or like the Bartok concerto. I think those two are concertos that are very I have not played, but are very attuned to my interest. But as for this competition in particular, because it was
Mhm.
so close to the start of the school year, I did not have time to like learn with a new teacher because I'm a freshman at Yale. I'm a new teacher.
Mhm.
I did not have time to like learn too much new repertoire. So I just picked repertoire that I had from before that I was most comfortable with, and that would that would be the Tchaikovsky and
Yeah, that's
Mozart.
smart. So speaking of this idea of exploration, you're at Yale University now with one of the great composition departments, one of the produced so many great composers and living composers. I'm curious about like what you're finding with contemporary music and what your ambitions are around that.
I haven't played a lot of contemporary music myself, but
Mhm.
I'm looking to play. I'm definitely looking to play more, especially because, well, in orchestra we've played some pieces that are contemporary pieces that I thought they were really cool. Um, and for some competitions, there's always like commission pieces sometimes, with like yeah, and some of them are yeah, I don't particularly enjoy, but a lot of them I think are actually like really well written, very like it's just very fun to play them. So and it's definitely a lot different again from like playing like romantic pieces. Um and I think that just I'm definitely trying to play more of those again just to build more repertoire, get more comfortable playing different things and yeah, have more facets in my playing.
Yeah, there is like you said, there's just so much great new music. A composer from Yale that I played a lot of her music was Missy Mazzoli, and a lot of that soul repertoire. I would encourage anyone who watches this to go check out her stuff. Dissolve of My Heart, Vespers for solo violin. These are some of like I think will be some of the real staples of the future repertoire. And there's also a lot of really great stuff that's a little performed. I think something I've seen more recently coming into the repertoire is the Britten Violin Concerto, which I had never heard when I was your age, and now I've probably played it 3 4 times in the last 5 seasons, 5 or 6 seasons with various soloists. So there's also this opportunity to go back and find repertoire that maybe needs a rebirth.
That was definitely something that our youth orchestra did a lot in high school, where our conductors would pick like a couple mainstream pieces and they would add in a bunch of like pieces, not necessarily contemporary, but like
Mm-hmm.
more pieces that at least me personally, I've never heard of, just because they were so like underrepresented in their time. And now I think it's a great way to like bring light to composers and such great music that it's not necessarily always has to be Brahms, Beethoven, Mozart. Yeah.
Yeah, well, since you've been at school now for a little bit, 6 7 months now, whatever it's been, what are some of the more interesting pieces that you played in school that you've been introduced to?
We played a piece in orchestra by Boulanger.
Mm-hmm.
I actually can't exactly remember what it was called, but it was like a very very different from what I expected it to be. And I thought because I had never even heard of her before, and I thought it was a very eye-opening experience because when I think like French, I always think like Ravel. That piece was very not Zagan, not Zagan for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, no, it's a great observation, Brandon. Her music that I've played is so buoyant, like it's just very like effervescent, and also, but it's so well constructed. You can see why she was such a sought after teacher. I mean, the construction of the piece is so tight. There's no flab in that music at all. What about chamber music?
In our first year, unfortunately, I have not been able to fit into my schedule because I have a limit on the number of credits that we can take. But I'm definitely looking to play chamber music next year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that some of my friends are in chamber music, and I know they're having a great time. They're playing some fantastic music. Um, and I definitely think that chamber music is something that I like. I think it's really fun. And I like playing solo music, but I definitely think chamber music is a different type of playing and it's a different type of fun. You get to like collaborate, and it's not really all about you at all. It's like
Mm-hmm.
a different feeling of like working together and making music as a whole. And I think that's in some ways even more rewarding than just playing
Mm-hmm.
a piece by yourself. So I'm definitely looking to
Yeah,
do that.
the repertoire is so rich. I remember when I was in college, I heard an interview with Joe Walsh. He was the guitarist for the Eagles. A lot of you probably don't know who they are. They're before my time, even. But they were a great rock band. They're still around. They're probably in their 70s now. But he said something about what he was really a formative experience for him was learning like every note and every nuance of every Beatles record. And I thought to myself, well, what's the analog of that for an aspiring violinist? And it was going through every chord or every Beethoven string quartet with my favorite recordings. So I think there's even an opportunity to learn this hugely important repertoire, even if you don't get the chance to play all of it with colleagues. Now, obviously, that's the ideal, is to work it out and rehearse it. But there is a huge growth opportunity to find like the ideal players. For me, it was the Cleveland Quartet, and go through them and really like, what are they doing measure by measure? And often when I was preparing for orchestra auditions, rather than listen to my favorite orchestras playing Mozart symphonies, I would think, what is the passage in a Mozart string quartet played by the best quartets? How would they approach this thing? And so I think to your point, Brandon, like the experience of playing chamber music has sort of a multiplier effect on your playing overall in your education. Brandon, before we wrap up, what's your favorite class so far at school? What are you most excited about, even if it's not music?
So we have to do a language requirement.
Okay.
And usually for like things that are, because I'm more of like a STEM kind of guy, I thought that the language classes and the humanities classes would be kind of boring. But I ended up taking Chinese, and I thought it was super interesting. We like learned Chinese through watching a lot of movies, and we talked about a lot of interesting topics and it turned out to be, I think, one of my favorite classes that I did not expect, for sure.
That's really interesting. Well, Brandon, this is a good place to wrap up. Thanks for making time to talk with us, and congratulations on winning last year. The next CVC competition is November 19th, 2023. And there's some great judges from the orchestra, from orchestras, chamber music, and academia. And there are two categories, young artist and senior division. And of course, Brandon won the senior division last year. And so for more information, go to the ChicagoViolinCompetition.org. And thanks for tuning in. And thank you, Brandon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.